In this video, I want to go over the proper setup for a single arm dumbbell row in a little more detail because there are often little areas of improvement that are required in order to do it correctly. Let's start by discussing the supporting arm. If you're working off a straight or flat bench, I should say, you will recall that you're working off of your hand. And I recommend you wrap the fingers over the edge of the bench like so, because working like this often puts a lot of pressure on the wrist that people find uncomfortable, or they compensate by bending the elbow. You want to be working off of a straight arm, and you also want to stay really active through the supporting shoulder. You don't want to sink into it. That applies even if you're working off of an incline bench. I recommend setting up at 30 degrees in this case and working off your forearm if you feel more comfortable here. The same principle of staying active through the supporting shoulder applies here. Now, the other thing that can sometimes go wrong in the setup is that your hips are not level or your pelvis is not level. So the inner hip may be higher than the outer or vice versa, and this can happen when there's a mismatch between the size of the bench and the length of your legs. So in my case, my bench is higher than an average bench and my leg length is shorter than an average person's leg length. The effect of this is going to be that the knee, the hip on the side of the bent knee is going to sit higher unless I bring that foot, the outer foot in, or better yet, set up a supporting plate or step, a very shallow platform for my outer foot. This brings my hips to a level position. The more common scenario, though, is a short bench and a longer leg length, in which case the outer hip will sit higher up, and I recommend then taking a wider step out. So a lot of people set up with that straight leg, the outer leg, quite close to the bench, and their hip is therefore too high. You're going to walk that foot out and level those hips, okay? Now, the other thing I want to remind you of is to stay neutral through the length of your spine. So from crown of your head right through your tailbone, you think of a nice neutral spinal position. Oftentimes people will forget and they're working with their head down. The last thing I'm going to mention is thinking about the shoulder blade as it moves through the range of motion. You think about that shoulder blade moving on the back of your rib cage from an outer position towards the center position towards your spine as you pull. Okay? Now, what can happen if you're doing it incorrectly is the shoulder blade is, instead of moving towards the spine and in, so retracting, it's traveling up towards your ear. So it's elevating and then depressing. That's a movement pattern that's faulty, and it may stem from lack of mobility and correct posture in the upper spine, in which case I do highly recommend you check out the posture and mobility resources in the app and have a look at some of the corrective strategies there for the upper body posture fix, okay? But the other thing that can often happen is people are over squeezing their lats. That happens with the neutral grip row where the elbow then stays really tight to the body and the shoulder blade is merely coming down, but it's not moving towards the center. You have to envision that the movement should be a sliding inward of the shoulder blade and a slight downward pull. So it's mainly retraction with some depression and then protraction and return to the anatomic position, okay? That applies with a neutral grip row, and it also applies with a pronated grip row. So it's a lot to think about, and as always, I encourage you to send video. It can be tricky the first time to figure out how to set it up, record yourself, upload it to an email, but eventually it pays off because once you know how to do it, it's much easier. Okay, hope that helps.